Good morning. It's Monday, April 3rd, and this is AP Language, and we are going to finish up this week our looking at and analyzing Frederick Douglass. Like I told you last week, you will work on this we have 2 more lessons, and then you have a review, and then you'll have a test. So, getting on with what we're going to do today, looking at your objectives. The objectives for today is we're going to compare or look at a character profile of Frederick Douglass's masters. We're going to analyze Douglass's tone in the apostrophe to the ships and his personification of slavery and freedom. We're going to identify and examine the climax, that should be, and its symbolism, and analyze and evaluate the slave master's manipulative methods. Think back to what you read on chapter 10. You should have noticed it's the longest chapter in the narrative. It contains the climax of the story. In this chapter, Douglass, you see, relates significant steps that he took toward his liberation, a freedom he sought both figuratively and literally, both psychologically and physically. The climax of the story, of the whole book, is the fight that he has with Edward Covey. From pretty much, you should notice that point on, he is never whipped again. He describes the outcome of this fight as a turning point and this resurrection of his spirit, his manhood, and his self-confidence, and his determination to be free in all aspects. He subsequently acted to help other people achieve such freedom by holding a Sabbath school at which he taught his fellow slaves to read, and by talking with most of the intimate fellow slaves about, or his intimate fellow slaves about freedom, manhood, self-respect, dignity, and the importance of at least trying to gain one's freedom rather than accepting the fate of being a slave for life. There's a mood of anticipation that's aroused in the reader as Douglass relates an increasing restlessness and yearning concerning his fate. There's a threat of hopelessness in his outlook, which is overcome by self-confidence, self-respect, and resolve. He notes reflectively toward the end of the chapter that his thoughts and feelings about seeking freedom were most profound when his situation with particular masters were less intolerable. When he lived with Mr. Covey and he had to concentrate on survival, he had no time or energy to think about the situation and his fate. Similarly, when he, I still can't say the word right, he worked in Miss Gardner's shipyard, he had no time to reflect on that which he most desired. You see, when he lived with Mr. Freeland, however, that he noted of his situation was tolerable and, aside from being a slave, not entirely unpleasant. Yet it is pretty much during this time that he planned to escape. He unsuccessfully attempted to run away with a few fellow slaves, actually placed him in what would be a position of, actually, he was at a greater advantage to escape than that of living again in Baltimore and working in a shipyard as a skilled tradesman. Working as a self-contracting caulker, he experiences a certain amount of freedom in the form of leisure time, time to reflect, in the semblance of being his own master. The desperation in Douglass's desire for freedom and his utter detestment of his circumstances in his life reach a climax in this chapter as well. His apostrophe to the ship, and you need to look that word up if you don't know what it is. I'm not referring to what you do to make something possessive. Apostrophe to the ship on the Chesapeake Bay and his personification of slavery and freedom both profoundly are expressed with increased intensity. The spiritual misery he experienced as a slave and his urgent need to escape or die in trying to escape. I want you to take a minute and go get the first handout from Mr. Campbell, and we're going to go back and look at, add to our little chart of slave masters. You did that last week on a set, and we're going to add 2 more to that. All right, when you get your set, you see it starts with Edward Covey, chapters 9 and 10. For location, you can go back and fill this in. For situation, he's a poor man, a farmer, and you can give 1 more bit of detail into his situation, what he uses other slaves for, and things like that. His personality, shocker, he's mean, deceptive, and I want you to give me 2 more adjectives that go along with that. And then for examples, I put on here that he whipped Douglas for his awkwardness. He gave his slaves enough to eat, but too little time to eat. And there's about at least 3 more examples that I want you to add to that. So you can take a minute and add to those. Next is William Freeland. He's from chapter 10. He's 3 miles from St. Michael's, that should be capitalized, Maryland. He's not rich, but, and I want you to finish that, what little element does he have that most rich people have? And the fact that he's not rich and has this is a little different. His personality, he's unpretentious, and there's at least 2 more adjectives you can add to that to describe him. And then I want you to provide me with 2 examples. So take a minute. You can obviously stop this as needed and fill that chart in and give it to Mr. Campbell when you're finished, and he'll give you the next worksheet. Okay, the next worksheet is pretty much self-explanatory, but I want to go through and look. So when you look at chapter 11, not chapter 11, handout 11, tells you up at the top to identify Douglas's tone in each of the following parts of his apostrophe to the ships on the Chesapeake Bay. Quite simply, you are just giving a tone word. Like for number 1, you can look, it would be resentment and envy. On a side note, resentment probably is a good answer for a lot of these, but do not put resentment on actually more than 1. You should not repeat the same words. So all you're doing on that one is just identifying a tone based on what was given. And in fact, for each of them, you should at least give 2 tones. I gave you for number 1, resentment and envy. You can go down, look at number 10. You've got faith, optimism. You could put hope. There's several on that one. When you look on the back of that page, it says identify the aspects of personification in the following images, then explain in literal terms what Douglas conveys figuratively in each image. So you're given a quote there that you are to go back and explain, giving the aspects of the first part of it, and you can label it aspects of personification, and then tell what it is, and then the literal meaning. So there will be 2 parts to each one of those answers, okay? The second part of that, or the next part of your little packet, says respond to the following questions concerning the slave master's treatment of slaves during the holidays and their manipulative methods of disgusting the slaves with freedom. So it just has some questions that you need to make sure you answer all parts of that question as you go through. Now, you can work on this the rest of the period. It is not going to be homework. Tomorrow we'll do the next lesson, and then Wednesday you're going to have a little time to finish several things up. So it's not homework if you don't finish it, but you'll have some time on Wednesday. Again, like I said, we'll do the next lesson, and then Wednesday finish up, and then you'll have a review Wednesday, Thursday, and then you'll have your test on Friday.